Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the show. Before I dive into today's topic, which is all about weight and metabolism and why so many of us struggle with losing weight in today's society and how we can understand that, I wanted to just take a moment to call your attention. If you hadn't noticed it already, the name of the show has changed to Unleash Your Healing Potential. And so let me just share in a brief moment why I've decided to change the show and the name. So when I started the show, I was really drawn to continuing to use the title of my book, You Are Not Your Diagnosis, as the title of the show. And working with people with chronic illness and sharing that message is definitely one of the hearts of the work that I do in the world. And it's definitely something that will continue to be part of the show. But over the course of about 20 episodes, I realized that that title kind of kept me feeling like I was limited to just talking more about things related to that. Or when I did share about other topics, I felt like maybe some people who needed to hear that message would be not listening to the show because the title seemed to just be focused on not being your diagnosis and chronic illness. So after kind of some soul searching and some time thinking, I really wanted to broaden the name so that all the people who need to hear the various messages and topics that I'm talking about will know that this podcast exists. So from now on, the show is called Unleash Your Healing Potential. And I'm really excited about it because it's the heart of the work that I do with clients, whether that be those with chronic illness, whether that be people with just dealing with kind of fatigue or anxiety, depression, trauma. I work with a broad range of issues with many of my clients. And I really believe in this particular message that our bodies can heal themselves, that we hold a tremendous potential for healing within our bodies. It's just many times the circumstances and the conditions aren't right for that to happen. And so the show is really focused on helping you in all the different ways and all the different tools and understandings and new science and research and guest interviews that I'll be doing in helping you to be able to unleash your healing potential so that you can be as healthy and as vibrant as you want to be in your life. So thanks for humoring me there for a moment as I just shared a little bit about the why for the change. And the content will continue to be very similar, but maybe a little bit broader still. So keep on listening. And thank you for those who are regular listeners. So let's dive into today's topic, which is one that I'm really excited about. And I want to share a little bit of my own story of a journey that I've been on this past year, which is around losing weight after struggling with losing weight for most of my adult life, barring a few years when I was actually really sick and underweight, which I'll kind of feature in this story of weight loss. I've struggled with this. And I felt like I've always done all of the right things. I've always, when I've been trying to lose weight, I've had a sensible diet. I've exercised. I've not done anything crazy. I've never taken diet pills or anything like that. I've always just come at it from this perspective of knowing that these are the healthy things to do. And yet many times I just struggled with not being able to lose weight or maintain that weight loss. So if you are somebody who's struggling with that, I want to share my own story as just kind of inspiration for you of what's possible and how I went through this process. And then after a little bit of sharing about that, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about why it is so hard for many of us in today's society to lose weight. What is the deal? So stay tuned for lots of great information as I finish my story. There's going to be a lot more after that story. So I want to kind of just jump back to kind of my teenage years, and starting after my, going through puberty, I was, like many teenage girls, conscious about my body. I did pick up a little bit of excess weight. I was also curvier than many girls. So like many teenage girls, body consciousness was definitely, I was self-conscious. I wore clothes that were too big. And I think it was the summer before my senior year. I don't remember for sure. It could have been the year before. I decided it was really important to me to try and lose a little bit of weight. I would feel better about myself. That was my motivation. So I decided that summer that I was just really going to focus on that. Didn't, again, go on any fad diet. I didn't take diet pills. I didn't starve myself. I just focused on a really healthy, nutritious diet, lean proteins, fruits and vegetables, not a lot of processed carbohydrates, processed foods, sugars. I was really conscious of what I ate. I think I even kept a food journal when I think back on it. And then I worked out regularly. I think I worked out 5 days a week for a decent amount of time. I would go to the gym. And I remember getting to the end of the summer and just feeling so frustrated, so disappointed because I had not lost a single pound. Now, looking back on it now, I probably had lost fat and I had gained muscle. So those two had kind of balanced each other out. But to me, it felt like I had failed at that point. And then going into my 20s, I always carried a little bit of excess weight. When I got really sick, I actually was underweight, which was a very different experience for me. And I have a lot of compassion too for people who are struggling with that for health reasons and not being able to put on weight. And this working with metabolism can actually help in those cases as well, because there's other reasons that we can have those imbalances. But for this focus here, I want to focus on more those who are struggling with trying to lose weight, but know that there are tools if this isn't you in my story, but you're just listening out of curiosity, that it can address that as well. So went through my 20s and into my 30s, still feeling, like I would be happier if I weighed just a bit less. I was never like obese, but I never felt like great at a weight that I was just happy with. And when I met my husband, I started picking up a bit of weight. We were dating, we were eating out a lot. And so over the course of about 5 or 6 years, I had gained about 25 pounds. So I got to the end of 2018 at my heaviest weight and realized that I was kind of freaking out by that. I had never hit a certain number on the scale. And it was like, oh, wow, okay, I weigh that much. And it wasn't just the number on the scale, it was how I felt in my body. So my feet would start to hurt if I was standing for more than about 10-15 minutes or walking very far. That was new. I was like, I don't normally have problems unless I've been on my feet a lot. I was just more fatigued. It just felt harder to do things. Like I was kind of dragging myself around. Buying clothes, forget about it. That was not fun anymore. I've always sort of enjoyed shopping for the most part. Did not want to go shopping because couldn't find things that made me feel good and feel like I looked flattering in them. And so I decided, something had to change. And a couple months before that kind of revelation, I had learned that one of my teachers was doing a lot of work with rebalancing metabolic hormones. And she started doing this work because she too had struggled, like many of us, with trying to lose weight and just not having success. And then she started using what was working for her clients. So I was very, very drawn to that work. And I knew that I really wanted to study and understand it and have it done on me, because I was like, I need help. There's something. I knew something wasn't right. That was definitely part of my process, was realizing it was just too much of a struggle. For a couple of years before that, I had been gaining and losing the same 10 pounds over and over again. So if I ate like really strictly paleo, hardly had any refined carbohydrates at all, I would lose the weight. I would be down that 10 pounds, and then I'd hit that wall. And then if I started to let those creep back in at all, weight came back on. It was just like on or off, very frustrating. So it was like, what's going on and why do I hit this plateau? So I took the class, and then starting January of last year, 2019, I started working one-on-one with my teacher, getting and receiving this work myself, because this was a big goal for me last year. I was like, these 25 pounds, they have to go. I do not want them anymore. Thank you, being in love, but it doesn't feel so lovely anymore. So that was a big focus. And through the work that she and I did together last year, I was able to successfully lose those 25 pounds. And it was, let me tell you, it was different than what I'd ever thought it would be in terms of, I kept thinking, well, maybe I'm going to have to exercise more, or maybe like, I don't know, I'm going to hardly be able to eat anything. I was getting to that point of being fearful of what I would need to do. And at one point, when I was doing all the things and I'm exercising regularly and not losing weight, my husband said, well, maybe you have to work out like more, like twice a day, or you need to work out for like 90 minutes to 2 hours. I'm like, I don't have time for that. I don't have the energy for that. No, thank you, honey. I can't. Like, I want to lose the weight, but I don't have that kind of time or energy to do that. So losing through this process was making some small changes in my diet. And these are very individualized. So don't take this as like, oh, if I copy exactly what she eliminated, it'll work for me, because our bodies adapt to different things. Our bodies don't process certain foods as well. And this is individual. So I had to cut back, for me personally, on eating potatoes, because my body, when I eat potatoes, it likes to hold on to it. So I don't completely avoid them, but I don't eat them very much, very often. And that was just one key thing that I had to do. I had to change up my exercise a little bit. I had to go from working out 3 times a week to more like 6, but again, not like crazy long workouts. And actually, one of the things that I needed to do was change it from workouts that weren't fun, which to me was most of the time I was on the treadmill or the stationary bike. Yawn. Some of you may love it, and that's great. For me, it's really boring to be in one place, and I used to play music to try and make it fun. It was not really fun. So I went from that to switching into more kind of like dance-based workouts, like I subscribed to Mia TV. And so doing something like that where I actually enjoy myself was like a key ingredient. So just through doing those sorts of things, I think in the first couple of months, it was like just going down 10 pounds and being like, whoa, that was like, I didn't expect it to be that easy. Like it felt easy, which is really interesting to me after years of just struggling. And of course, there have been moments where it's been frustrating and it hasn't felt the easiest, because making changes and being consistent and like exercising 6 days a week, there are weeks where I'm like, I'd rather do 4. So I have to motivate myself. But at the same time, when I was seeing the results, it was easier to keep consistent and to keep motivating myself into those things. So enough of my story. I hope it was inspiring in terms of you can relate to it, and also understand that when things align in our metabolism, which is what I'm going to be talking about here in a moment, that it can be a lot easier than we've ever experienced before in terms of losing weight. So let's now change gears a little bit. Let's talk about, why is it so darn hard for most of us to lose weight? So it has to do a lot, for many, many of us, with metabolic hormones and the imbalances that exist. So we have lots of metabolic hormones. There's several dozen that I work with in my practice. There's probably even more, but those are kind of the ones we understand the best, or the key ones. And why do we have that many to begin with? So that's where I want to start, is that if you think about all of the time humans have been on the earth and in existence, for most of that time, there's been a very real danger of starving to death, right? So thousands of years ago, we would just hunt and gather. So it depended on what you could find in a day, whether you went to bed hungry or not. And so our bodies really needed to be prepared for that very real possibility we could starve. And our metabolism was more geared towards like getting the most out of whatever it could from whatever we ate. So like getting every last little bit of energy and, whatever fat it could store up, so that, if tomorrow we didn't have such a good hunt and gather, we wouldn't die. So there's a lot of redundancy really in this system to make sure we're not in danger of starving. But for most of us in this modern world that we live in, especially in first world countries, we have things like grocery stores, and you can walk aisles and aisles and aisles of food with very calorie dense foods, things that we didn't have access to, or very limited, things that didn't exist, like ice cream, has a lot of fat and calories. Or, we didn't have a lot of access to things that had fats occurring in meats. You might only get meat occasionally when you're hunting and gathering. Now we have more access to it. So we have plentiful food supply, not in any danger of starving for most of us anytime soon. Yet our bodies still keep thinking, no, starvation could be around the corner. So we have all of these kind of safety mechanisms built into our metabolism to make sure that we're not in any danger of starving tomorrow. Be prepared. Great, a couple thousand years ago, not so ideal now. Now, for some people, these metabolic hormones work as they're supposed to. And, as long as they're eating a healthy diet, not overeating, they maintain a nice, healthy weight. You probably know some of those people where it's like they seem to be able to eat what they want and they stay a healthy weight and they're not doing anything crazy. But for a lot of us, our metabolism is not that way. And so that's what I want to be sharing about here, is that it's challenging for many of us in terms of our metabolism, because there are these imbalances that get set up in these hormones. And so they condition us more towards thinking we might starve to death and got to hold on to everything. Starvation could be around the corner. So now you're probably saying, well, why do these imbalances exist? Like, how did this happen? So there's a lot of different reasons that this happens. And these are some of the same reasons that contribute to a lot of health problems. So the toxins that we're exposed to, things like endocrine disruptors, so drinking from plastic water bottles, cooking on nonstick cookware, different things that are in our water supply, like all of those things can change how these hormones are working. And many of them contribute to weight gain. In addition to that, things like even just what happened to your ancestors in their lifetime affect us. So this is reassuring in one way. It's not all your fault. It can have to do with what your ancestors went through a couple hundred years ago. So for most of us, our ancestors, probably we have at least a couple that maybe went through a period of food scarcity, a famine, because, a couple hundred years ago, food wasn't so readily available and steadily available. They may have only had a limited amount of food. They may have gone to bed slightly hungry regularly as a child just because of food availability, and especially if they weren't very wealthy, right? So their bodies then conditioned to deal with that circumstance and figure out how to adapt, because our bodies are all about trying to survive and adapt. But whatever happened then in terms of those changes for them, well, we actually can inherit those same changes. And so if your ancestor learned how to eke out every calorie from a potato because they lived through the famine there in Ireland, your body might then know how to eke out so many every bang for every buck from everything you eat. And so those things can condition us. Other things, like if we're not sleeping well, like sleep actually plays a role in all of how all these hormones work. How much sugar we're eating, because sugar contributes to other issues with things like insulin not working properly. So we're storing improperly, or our blood sugar levels are too high. All of these different factors really contribute to why we struggle. And then things that we've done to our food supply or diet trends have also played a big role. So a number of years ago, I think probably in like 70s or the 80s, there was a big kick of fat is bad. So everything was non-fat or low fat. And unfortunately, what happens when we take certain foods and we take the fat out of them is they taste terrible. And so they had to figure out ways to actually make the food taste better, because it just had no taste if you take the fat out of certain things. So then they added sugar. And now, of course, today we add high fructose corn syrup to everything, which just contributes again to these insulin imbalances, to the spike in type 2 diabetes. That's very rampant, especially in North America and in America especially. So all these different factors are really imbalancing our metabolism, and these hormones that are set up to make us think that we're in danger of starving and keep us safe from that, Well, plentiful food, but all of the ways we've manipulated our food have kind of imbalanced that. So the bottom line here, if I've kind of talked a lot of sciencey pieces here, but the bottom line is if your metabolic hormones are conditioned and imbalanced to making you think that you are still in danger of starving, that, you know, that could happen tomorrow, then it's very hard for your body to be able to lose. So those things were great for us, you know, hundreds of years ago, but now if they're imbalanced, it's like trying to lose weight is like trying to push a giant boulder uphill. Not very many of us can be very successful, or result doesn't really last for very long. I think that's actually a perfect analogy that just came to me. And it can feel like that too, right? Like we're just pushing this freaking big heavy boulder up the hill and we're not getting anywhere. So these are some of the reasons why many of us struggle with trying to lose weight, is because we're working against this biology. And then when this biology gets imbalanced and we're locked into our body still thinking, hey, we're going to starve tomorrow, even though we have plenty of stores of fat on our body, then we're not doing what we need to be able to do. We're not able to release that weight. There's a couple other things that I want to highlight here too, which are kind of some misunderstandings scientifically of losing weight. And one is around counting calories. So that has been for a long time the model of you want to lose weight, right? You probably know this. I don't even really have to reiterate it, but I will. So, you know, the formula for losing weight would be you take the number of calories that you eat in a day and you subtract the number that you burn. And if there's not less there, you know, if it's not a negative number, you're not going to lose weight. So you have to burn more than you eat. That's what we've been told for years. That's what places like Weight Watchers and certain diet systems are all based on. But it's really faulty science, because not every single calorie is equal. McDonald's hamburger does not equal, you know, eating a nice organic, perfectly healthy omelet made from, you know, grass-fed eggs and all of those things. Sorry, I'm just thinking about food here. Anyway, they're not the same thing, you know, or eating like healthy vegetables does not equal eating something that's like processed. Like you might find two things that are equal in the number of calories, and yet they're not the same thing. And certain things actually make us satisfied and turn off that hunger signal versus other things that actually amp it up. So that hamburger, that greasy McDonald's hamburger, actually can keep you feeling hungry. Like that's what it can do to your system. It's actually researched and proven that there are certain components and certain type of fats that actually make you want to keep eating. Whereas if you have like a egg is actually designed to help shut off that hunger signal, and you feel full and your blood sugar stays nice and stable. So not all calories are equal. So if you're looking at that, then you may say, well, I guess then exercise doesn't really matter. Like if you're just looking at that model, so it doesn't really matter like if I exercise. And the research science there says it actually does, but it's for a different reason. And that is because of a specific hormone that they've recently discovered, which is called irisin. And that's our fat burning hormone. So we produce this particular hormone when we do things like aerobic exercise. And when we do the aerobic exercise and irisin is working properly and the receptors are working properly, then we burn off fat by exercising. But for many, like myself, irisin doesn't work right. And so I was exercising and yet I wasn't getting anything in return from it. The fat burning was not happening. So either from not making enough irisin, so deficiency, or the receptors for that particular hormone, it's like they're not seeing it. Like irisin comes floating by and they're like, I don't see any irisin. So for me, that made a huge difference in the work that I received, was just rebalancing the irisin, rebalancing that particular signal. And then it was like, oh, wow, all of a sudden, like I work out and something actually happens. So, but that's kind of why exercise is important. It's not from that perspective of calories in versus calories burned. So that's old science. And if you're just trying to base everything off of that, that's part of why you're not going to get very far, is because it's not um, the way our bodies really are geared to work. And we need irisin instead of just counting what, calorie for calorie and subtracting that number. So I thought that was just a really interesting piece of information of how like old science really plays a role in our success or lack of success in metabolism. And it's interesting too, because our bodies really adapt, to what we do. So what may work is then, we hit those plateaus, and then our body adapts to that because it's always trying to conserve again, because of that starvation mode or that fear of starvation that's always there in the background. So what is this takeaway from all of this? I've talked about how I've had success. I've talked about why we have these imbalances in our hormones. So the takeaway is really, if you are not having success in losing weight and you're doing all the right things, you're exercising, you're eating sensibly, and yet the scale just does not change for you, or you kind of just up and down all the time, this is probably the reason why. And without a way to rebalance these metabolic hormones, which is something that I'm able to do in the work that I do, we can go in there and understand the story, like how did this program get corrupted? Was it an ancestor? Was it a toxin you were exposed to? Was it something traumatic that happened to you? What was it that set up this imbalance? And then we can get the body to actually course correct and tap into, no, I should be making more of this hormone, or I need to see this, or I'm making too much, because certain things we can make too much. And it's really amazing then how our bodies can start to do the process that naturally should be occurring of maintaining a healthy weight. So again, for me, it was very gradual, and required some change and some consciousness and lifestyle changes, but it wasn't like crazy intense. When people say, oh, you worked really hard for that. Yes and no. Once the conditions are set up correctly in our bodies and our metabolism is balanced in the right way, then we can successfully lose weight. But if our body is constantly running that program of, I'm going to starve tomorrow, hold on to everything, we are going to be in a no-win situation where we're not going to have success. So that's why I love this work so much, is because it's a total game changer to be able to rebalance these metabolic hormones. It's not necessarily about lifestyle factors, and some people may need support there too, because we don't always know the right things to eat, or we may hate working out, we may not know how to work out and in a way that feels good to us. So sometimes that kind of support is necessary. But sometimes it's like, I'm doing the right things, I'm putting the right ingredients in my cake, and it's not turning out right. So why is that? And this is like looking at, well, what's going wrong in this internal recipe of all of these hormones, and how did these imbalances get set up? So if this really speaks to you and you're struggling and you are curious about it, I invite you to reach out to me, and we can chat a little bit about kind of the specifics of what this work looks like and how I might be able to support you, because believe me, it's amazing to be able to actually have the success that you want without having it be crazy making. So it was definitely not a year of crazy making. It was just a year of feeling like, wow, like I'm actually seeing the results that I want. And I would love to be able to help you have those results. If that's something that's on your list of goals or intentions for 2020, reach out and we can chat about how I might be able to support you. But regardless of whether that is something you want, I hope this at least sheds a little bit of light on why this might be happening for you, why you might be struggling, and that it really takes it from feeling like it's your fault, you're a failure, you're not doing something right. Like Am I broken? Like I've heard that from a few people too. Like, and I think I felt a little bit that way myself. Like I must just be broken. Like this just doesn't work for me. Like what works for some people just doesn't work for me. Well, it's not really that you're broken. It's just that certain things aren't working right. So I wish you, no matter where you are on that journey with your weight, much success. If I can help support you in any way, I am here. So reach out. And I just also like to say that, love your body no matter what. I still loved myself 25 pounds ago. It just didn't feel like me anymore, like where I wanted to be. So if you're happy where you are with your weight, that's wonderful. Like I celebrate that, and don't let anybody tell you what you should or shouldn't do, what you should or shouldn't look like. But if this is something you're struggling with, then I hope it's given you a little bit of insight into what's going on in your body and how you might change that. So thank you for taking the time to listen, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode.